Thank you. I used to laugh at people when they would get to the podium and pull out their glasses because they can't see, and I can't see. I can't see any of this. I know him as Deheezy. But tonight I have the pleasure of introducing you to Dallas S. Jones, who's the president and CEO of Elite Change. And since 2006, Elite Change has grown to be nationally and internationally recognized in the areas of public affairs, strategic communications, and business development. The organization boasts of clients on the international, national, and state, local levels with offices in Houston, Washington, D.C., Dallas, Jackson, Mississippi, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana. In 2014, Elite Change was recognized with the prestigious Pinnacle Award from the Greater Houston Black Chamber of Commerce. Prior to forming Elite Change, Mr. Jones worked for the Texas State Representative Garnett Coleman as a policy analysis and later district director. He also served as district director for Texas State Senator Rodney Ellis, and in addition, he served as the regional field director for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. In 2010, the NAACP at the Congressional Black Caucus Annual Legislative Summit named Mr. Jones as the 40 powerful leaders under 40 in the country. In 2011, the Houston Business Journal named Mr. Jones as one of the 40 young business leaders under 40 in Houston. Adding to his accomplishments, Mr. Jones was named 2012's Child Advocate of the Year by the Houston Area Association of the Education of Young Children. An alumnus of Sam Houston, where I know him, he has traveled the country as a national speaker and trainer. Mr. Jones is also a well-known commentator on television, radio, and regularly appearing on Houston's ABC and Fox's affiliate. Mr. Jones is an alumnus of the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University's Global Emerging Leaders Program. He's also very active in his community, where he serves as vice chair of the 4th Ward Redevelopment Authority and the vice chair of the Exceptional Men of the Talented 10th Incorporated, as well as on the board of the Most Worship of E.M. Hunter Grand Lodge of Texas. In 2014, Mr. Jones was inducted into Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. He's also a graduate of Leadership Houston Class 30. He resides in 3rd Ward with his wife, Angela, also an A-Leaf graduate, and daughter Zoe. Mr. Jones and his families are members of the Fountain of Praise Church. And before I introduce our speaker tonight, often people talk about having a seat at the table, and they quote that, but I would like to offer to you that Mr. Dallas Jones is not only at the table, but he's helping craft the menu for the city, for Black Houston, for politics, and for policy. So I would like to offer that tonight, as he shares with you, that you dig deep and take more from him than a hashtag in a tweet. Ladies and gentlemen, Dallas S. Jones.
Thank you to my classmate, the honorable trustee, Tiffany Thomas, and since she told my college nickname, we used to call her Meat and Cheese. Back on the yard, but I won't go into the explanation of all that. But thank you for the work you're doing. We came up together as student leaders at Sam Houston State, and both A-Leaf alum, and proud to be from the SWAT, the southwest side of our city, and a diverse community, a great place to grow up. And so very proud of the work you're doing on behalf of our community. And our old neighborhood, and return to the Leaf and doing the work there, and to Dr. Conyers and the faculty of the African American Studies program. We certainly, I thank you for allowing me this opportunity to share with you some thoughts in regards to your theme for the evening. The legacy of protest and struggle. To my other college classmate in here, where she said, Omawale, definitely thank you for the invitation to be a part of tonight's festivities. I'm truly honored. And Dr. Elwyn Lee, of course, a staple here at University of Houston and doing amazing work. His family is truly a blessing to the city of Houston, and certainly to me and my family personally. His wife, Congresswoman Jackson Lee, gave me my first job here in politics in Houston. His daughter, Erica, is a good friend and also a client of our firm. So thank you for the great work you continue to do here at the University of Houston. And of course, to Judge Hazel Jones, who has done some great work for us on the court. Thank you for being here to support the program as well. City Councilman Jarvis Johnson, who represented District B, the north side, and I tend to go on air on Fox from time to time and kind of pontificate about things, but I as I'm watching the landscape on some things, you might just be replacing the city council member Jarvis Johnson with a new title here soon if I had to call the handicap on that race. So good luck to you on that and your pursuit. And finally to the students of the program, which really it's the reason why we're here. It's the reason why we're all gathered to raise money for scholarships. Congratulations to you all for your accomplishments. I kind of sat here and watched everybody, getting their awards and just the excitement in the face. I was reminded, of that feeling of being in college and almost getting ready to get thrust into the real world. And, as Dr. Seuss reminded us, the places you all will go. And so really cherish this opportunity and the experience that you're getting here and the great folks that are here to teach you and nurture you and prepare you for what is to come on your journeys and really just soak in all that you can in traveling the globe. And I see Michelle Barnes here from the Community Artists Collective. Good to see you, Mr. Barry Barnes, as well. And so I will be not before you long, but reflecting on some things in regards to the legacy. And before I do that, actually, real quick, just, because I get asked a lot of times, so just kind of put into context, and one more plug, I'm sorry. And I also want to thank my mother for being here with me. She looking like she didn't know I was gonna call her name. I drug her here with me tonight. I told her I'm not gonna do it again though, because she's been harassing me the whole time. You know how your mama do. But I'm glad to have her here. This is Mother's Day weekend, so I told her she should come and hang out tonight. And so, a lot of times I get asked what it is we do at Elite Change, and it started off as something that I never knew I'd want to do. In terms of this government and public affairs work. And, I often describe it as being a social architect, and that's composing the makeup of our society from a public policy perspective. And what does that mean? Well, before you get to making policy, you have to have good leaders to make that policy. And so part of the work we do is helping to elect leaders that are going to have a significant impact to creating good policies that are going to help to enhance our communities. And then after that, you have to have the support of good institutions and good corporations, and there has to be a synergy between them. And so we often thrive to work for nonprofits and corporations to help them interface with those leaders in order to come up with policy solutions that are going to thereby enhance our communities. And so that's the work that we do. It's taken me places that, frankly, I never, I never thought I'd go. I had the honor of spending, months last year in Trinidad and Tobago and electing the prime minister of the seventh prime minister of a developing nation, and understanding what it meant to live abroad, and certainly gave me a perspective for the students that are traveling to Africa of our interconnectivity. I would go to after work. I'd go to work, and I would go back to the condo, and I would watch CNN, and I would watch BET, and I would watch the same stuff that I would watch at home. And I'm going, I thought I was in another country. I know I took a 6.5 hour flight to get here, but there were so many similarities from the music they were listening to, to just every way of life that we thought. But the reality of it is there were also things that we often take for granted, right? That was a different reality for the folks of the country. So getting to understand that and experiences like that lead to other experiences, and now we will journey to work on, and we were successful. We did elect the prime minister, so we won. That's always helpful. And so now we will journey to the Bahamas to elect the prime minister of that nation over the next couple of months. And we're excited about that work as well. So that's a bit of what we do. But on our subject of this concept of the legacy of protest and struggle, if you will journey with me for some time in regards to this notion, the legacy of protest and struggle. The general sentiment of mankind is that a man who will not fight for himself when he has the means of doing so is not worth being fought for by others. And this sentiment is just. For a man who does not value freedom for himself will never value it for others, or put himself to any inconvenience to gain it for others. Such a man, the world says, may lie down until he has sense enough to stand up. It is useless and cruel to put a man on his legs if the next moment his head is being brought against a curbstone. Let me give you a word of the philosophy of reform. The whole history of the progress of human liberty shows that all concessions yet made to her august claims have been born of earnest struggle. The conflict has been exciting, agitating, all-absorbing, and for the time being, putting all other turmoils to silence. It must do this or it does nothing. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. I wish that I could stand here and tell you those were my words, so eloquently written, but they weren't. On August 3rd, 1857, Frederick Douglass delivered a West India emancipation speech in New York, and on the 23rd anniversary of the event. Most of the address was a history of British efforts towards emancipation, as well as a reminder of the crucial role of the West Indian slaves in that own struggle. However, shortly after he began, Douglass sounded a foretelling of the coming American Civil War. He uttered 2 paragraphs that became the most quoted sentences of all of his public orations. They began with the words, "If there is no struggle, there is no progress." As we reflect on the legacy of protest and struggle, we find that it is a legacy rich in the progress that Frederick Douglass professed in 1857. It is a legacy that was born out of necessity and what Dr. King described as our fierce urgency of now. We are all familiar with the progress of African Americans in this country, and so I will spare you the redundancy of the details, as this is an African American Studies scholarship banquet, so I don't think I need to go into how far we've come since slavery. But when we reflect on the legacy of protest and struggle, we often credit the leaders of our rich history, leaders like Dr. King and Malcolm X and Frederick Douglass and so many others. However, we often forget about the pioneers of our great social movements and protests. These pioneers paved the way for change throughout so many cities across our nation, beginning with slavery. You know, we all excited about getting ready to spend some Tubmans. So beginning with slavery, some tubs. But traveling through the civil rights movement, these pioneers were simply the people. Let us remember what one of the initial sparks of the American civil rights movement was as we know it, the Montgomery bus boycott. It was the independent and defiant action of a single woman that was simply sick and tired of being sick and tired. It was students who came together and called for the need for change in their community, students like you. So they began to organize what was a loosely formed group of sit-ins at lunch counters that began to inspire young people around the country to become agents of change. And from that, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was born. All around the country, it was the people that sparked these movements that allowed leadership to be the spokespeople for the movement. But they were merely the spokesmen. It was the people that made the movement real, that made the movement relevant. The fundamental principles of our country were founded on the notion that people wanted to liberate themselves from the idea of tyranny and oppression. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. We do ordain and we do establish this Constitution of the United States of America. This is what we were born under. And while the legacy of struggle and protest is rich, I would offer to you today that our work is not done. We, the people, still have some ways to go. We are on, and you know, we are at a scholarship banquet, and I will try to be as apolitical as possible. It's difficult for me at times. But we are on the dawn of a pivotal moment in the history of African Americans living in the United States of America today. In 2017, this country will say goodbye to its first African American president, who will return the reins of power to a Caucasian American, whomever he or she may be. This proves to be pivotal because there will be a great evaluation of the progress of African Americans living in this country over the last 8 years. And with this evaluation, and depending on the outcome of the election, there will be an attempt to roll back some of the progresses that have been made for the African American community. The question that lies before us is, will we be ready for these attacks? Or will we act foolishly, bickering and fighting for a seat at the master's table while we watch the rest of our community get fed the scraps. 8 years after President Obama took office, there is still much work to be done in the fight for social justice and economic equality in this country. In the last 8 years, we saw the emergence of the American Tea Party, born out of the mantra that we want our country back. From who? What's most alarming about this is not only the emergence of the Tea Party, rather its ability to completely hijack a major American party. We face the possibility of an extreme ideologue taking up residence in the White House. The presumptive nominee on the Republican presidential ticket got there by jockeying for position with other candidates to see who could hate the most. And we were having a conversation that what you see is a case of their chickens coming home to roost. You spent 8 years beating the drum of hate, that it became so vehement that you began to hate yourself. And the conservatives weren't conservative enough for the conservatives. And you sit back and you go, how does it happen? How does Donald Trump win the nomination when we all sat back and thought he was just gonna fizzle, just gonna fizzle, just gonna fizzle? Because you created a culture of hate in this country that you can no longer control. What's most alarming, we face the possibility, what is even more fascinating is that Mr. Trump gained this position by somehow managing to offend every sector of our society that was not white, male, or Christian. Excuse me, white, male, and Christian. You were that if you're cool. If if you didn't fit all three of those, you probably got offended by Donald Trump in the last year and a half. Foreign countries have created movements to completely, potentially ban Donald Trump from their countries due to what's coming out of his mouth. And yet, the American Republican Party, this is really not about Republican versus Democrat. This is really about Donald Trump, right? They will make this person their nominee to be president of the United States, and even worse, leader of the modern free world. If there was ever a time for us to reflect and then move on the legacy of struggle and protest, the legacy is now. 8 years after change we can believe in. 8 years after being powered by hope. 8 years after Americans showed us that the country that they wanted was a country that was not made up of red states and blue states, but of purple states, United States. We find ourselves in a country more divisive than it has ever been since the American Civil War. How did this happen? When did it happen? On September 15, 1963, Addie Mae Collins, Cynthia Wesley, Carol Robinson, and Carol Denise McNair were preparing for their Sunday school lesson in a church basement at the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham. 3 of the girls were 14 years old, 1 was 11. They never left the church that day because hate prevailed, and they lost their lives at the hands of white supremacists who bombed the church, killing 4 beautiful black babies. On June 17th, 2015, in Charleston, South Carolina, at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church, Cynthia Marie Graham Hurd, Susie Jackson, Ethel Lee Lance, DePayne Middleton Doctor, Clementa C. Pickney, the church's pastor and a South Carolina senator, Sharonda Coleman Singleton, Tawanza Sanders, Daniel Simmons, Myra Thompson. See, you have, it's not enough just to talk about what happened. You have to say their names. These were people with names. These were human beings. And they were also preparing to go to a Bible study and welcomed in a stranger. Welcomed in. And that stranger unleashed one of the most heinous and hateful acts of terror in modern history against African Americans. 9 people lost their lives in their house of worship. From 1963 to 2015, the motive was still the same. It was the motive of hate. We have to open our eyes to see that we can't move forward to defend ourselves and our children from these types of attacks until we collectively actually come together and realize that the legacy of struggle and protest is actually not over. And we certainly can't get there by just sitting around running separate courses trying to figure it all out. From 1963 to 2015, it was still the policies of the time that allowed for the deaths of our people. President Obama has called for reforms in our gun laws, but he can't do that alone. This isn't some television show that we just watch and we believe that it's all gonna, go away when we turn off the TV. How many more children, our children, have to die before we come together and say enough is enough? Yes, Black Lives Matter, okay? But that has to be more than a slogan. It has to be a call to arms for us as the people, as leadership, to empower and organize our local communities to fight for local, state, and national policies that will protect our babies. That means we have to have the courage and the wisdom and the fight to replace elected officials in our communities that are not carrying out their duties. Look, I'm a political consultant by trade. I help to get many of our elected officials into office, but I also make it abundantly clear that helping someone getting elected doesn't give them a free pass, at least not with me, to just do whatever that is contradictory to the best interests of the community. My expectation, like yours, is that you will fight, that you will do what is right by our communities. When that fails to happen, then I'm obliged to help remove anyone that I helped to get elected. And it then becomes my duty, because I understand that I helped to create the problem in the first place that has to be rectified. It's really enough of us being sold down the road with the same old tired talk. And we keep getting that talk because it works. At some point, we have to open our eyes, take a long look at our communities, and when we discover that we aren't getting any better than we were when we elected these folks, then it's time to take actions. I believe the true progress of one's work is staring us right in the face. So if you can't look around your communities and see changes that has happened, then that means that nothing has happened, and that's okay. I believe that when the social contract is signed between the voter and the politician, that both signed the contract with good intentions. But like any other contract, if you do not perform the duties that you are contracted to do, then you're fired. People get fired every day. I've been fired, right? It's not a stain on who you are as a person. It just means that you're not good at the job that we hired you to do. The other side of that is that we have to be prepared and willing to help those elected officials, leaders, that are being effective for our communities, because they do need help. They can't do it alone. We also have to be willing that there's still a time for us, and understanding that there's also still a time for us to be civilly disobedient. And when the systems and institutions around us fail us, that we must act. I worry. I worry about my generation, and even more, I worry about the generation that's coming behind me, because we just have too much. You know, we have our little degrees, our little accolades, our status, our cars, and we're content. We made it. You know, funny joke, I got to, I was in Washington last week, and I had a chance to have breakfast in the West Wing. And, you know, I'm walking through, and I called my mom. I was joking with her. I was like, Mom, I made it. Right? But that's our mentality. We made it. And we stopped caring about the least of us. We forget about the home girls and the home boys. Tiffany, those folks that's still in A-Leaf, that's still struggling, still trying to find their way, that never made it out. We've got about the broken communities that are all around us. Poverty that's just running rampant. Hopelessness, lack of resources, lack of education, lack of skills. So somewhere along the way, we just stopped fighting. We stopped caring. You know, one of the most fascinating things, and not in a good way, I see when, you know, every 2 years we go to Austin for legislative session, and I'm living there for 6 months. And during that session, is that how many of us don't actually come and participate in the process when most of it affects us? Hearing after hearing on issues like public education, I could literally count the amount of African Americans in the room. And it was one of them situations, you know, you see another brother in the room, and it's so few of us, you just glad to see him. You like, what's up, bruh? He on the other side of the room, because we're just so few. In case something could go down, I'm just glad to know you over there. But on issues like public education, we were silent. And who do you think are the students in HISD? It's only 9% Anglo. Meanwhile, the other side of the coin, they were standing behind their leaders. Oh, they were there in buses, in droves. We want our country back. We want our state back. We want our schools back. They were there. That's what got me into this whole notion of public policy. It is the architecture of society, and whereby structures are created that can have dynamic effects on populations. It's powerful stuff going on in Austin and in Washington and even at City Hall, yet we never pay attention. Archbishop Desmond Tutu once stated, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse and you say that you are neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. The time is now for us to come together, understand the needs of our community, come up with plans in complacency, help educate the oppressed and the depressed, communities that are facing real systemic threats, and create a plan. It's not just for you, it's for me, it's for us. While we look at the legacy and the history, there's much to celebrate, but we also need to reflect on the notion that we have the power to make history. We're a chosen generation that has the ability, my young brothers and sisters, that are going to go out and change the world. a recent illustration of the power of the people, and I'll go to my seat. Students like you. On November 9th, 2015, the nation watched when University of Missouri President Tim Wolf resigned as the president after an uprising by the students. That didn't just happen overnight. There was a series of events that took place that caused change to happen. Let's look at them. Ferguson. Everybody in this room turned on your TV and watched what was happening in Ferguson, Missouri. And it looked like a war zone. We couldn't believe this was happening in our country, right? And particularly for us who are younger, we had not seen it. Looked like a war zone. Students complained about the university's lack of response to Ferguson. They complained about the lack of the university, which turned into them complaining about the lack of response to racial tensions on campus. In April, as a result, a swastika was etched onto the dorm stairwell wall of one of the dorms on the University of Missouri campus. Fast forward to September, the student body president was called the N-word. October, black students' play rehearsal was interrupted by racial slurs when a white man walked in and began to use racial epithets in the middle of them rehearsing for a play. The school responded by coming up with an online mandatory diversity training, which students thought was inadequate and did not go far enough to address the real racial issues happening on the campus. It's homecoming time. Protesters blocked the president's car and would not allow his car to roll down the homecoming parade. That was October 10th, 2 days after they announced the diversity training. October 24th, feces was used to draw a swastika again in the residence hall. That was on the 24th of October. They put a swastika on the wall. On the 26th, 2 days later, President Wolf met with the student groups and wouldn't acknowledge that there was a systemic racism problem on the campus. 2 swastikas, a student body president that had been called the N-word, and a student play that's been interrupted. Also calling them the N-word, but we don't have a race problem. November 2nd, week later, a graduate student decided to do something. Jonathan Butler. He went on a hunger strike. 4 days later, the president apologizes and he acknowledges racism. November 7th, their pockets started hurting because the football team threatened to boycott. November 8th, President Wolf said, "I'm not going anywhere." Same day, legislators said, "You need to go," including the governor, because you can no longer effectively lead. Then he resigned. But for a spark. It took only a spark, a willingness for the students, for someone, for the people to stand up and say enough. And the world watched, and then it changed. That's us. That's me. That's you. And while the journey continues, we've come this far by faith because we are naturally a people of resilience, a people of faith, and a people of power. In 1857, Mr. Douglas concluded his address by simply saying, "Sir, I have now more than filled up the measure of my time. I thank you for your patience, attention given to what I've had to say. I have aimed, as I said at the beginning, to express a few thoughts about having some relation to the great interest of freedom, both in this country and in the British West Indies and abroad. And I have said all that I mean to say. And the time will not permit me to say more.